Hi folks, it's Coach Kelvin here from the We Run Virtual Run Club and We Run Coach for Leeds and surrounding areas, as well as online coaching. In this little video, I'm going to share some thoughts off the back of a question asked by Phil in the Virtual Run Club Facebook group. And that is, it's a big question, how to get faster. And everyone's thinking like, oh, isn't that everybody's goal? You know, either how to get faster, how to run further, or how to run further whilst going faster. And all that's, saying that's really true, that a lot of runners, the goal is to get faster and to, beat race times and things like that. But there's some sort of really important elements about getting faster that are so often missed by runners. And one thing that's really interesting is that, a runner's 1 mile pace, so how fast they can do a 1 mile all out effort, correlates really well with their 5k time, their 10k time, their half marathon time, their marathon time, their 50k time, and maybe even getting on towards 50 miles upwards in ultras. Because the faster you can run shorter distances, the more mechanically efficient the body's working. So we have to be quite careful that we don't just try to get faster with lots and lots and lots of easy running if we're not mechanically very efficient. It would be the equivalent of maybe building up a really big, fast car, but then trying to drive it in a race with the handbrake slightly on, the tyres not pumped up very well, and the tracking of the wheels slightly out, or the kind of nuts holding the wheels on were a little bit wobbly. It wouldn't go as fast. And people can get into this kind of almost habit of just too much easy running. We've talked about 80-20 before, where 80% needs to be predominantly aerobic and 20% needs to be more than that. But that 20% that's more than aerobic is more than top end zone 2. So it's zone 3 and above, and 20% of zone 3 and above is quite a lot of running, quite a lot of faster pace running. But we do need to be set up well for this, and that's why we sort of say 80-20 isn't 80-20 all the time. We may start a base building phase in 95-5, and in a peak training block for a 5k we might be 60-40. So getting faster is about running faster and getting these shorter distance times down first, before we then develop the other systems, for a number of reasons. So one of the reasons is the mechanics. The other reason is to drive VO2 max and lactate threshold, or lactate turn point, rather. I'm going to use a UK terminology, so lactate turn point and VO2, driving them up the scale a little bit, which can be done in a relatively short period of time, allows more capacity to add the aerobic work. And whilst we're adding the aerobic work, we're actually mechanically more efficient off the back of the faster pace running. So essentially what I'm saying is we need really good periodization of our training to get faster. And what this can't really be is general. So we can't be just doing general kind of ad hoc sessions. Each session has to be a progression on the last session, a progression of a certain system built up over a certain period of time. So we peak that system, then we drop the volume of that intensity to hold that to a maintenance level, and to allow capacity to then layer on other things. So what does that look like in terms of training for a race? So this is what we might do with a runner that maybe lacks a little bit of top end speed. And the further we are away from an event, the more we work on a runner's weaknesses. So if a runner's weakness is top end speed, we want to bring that into the training really, really early. There is a little bit of a challenge. We do want to drive aerobic capacity and aerobic endurance and connective tissue capacity first to make that runner strong enough to handle faster paced workouts. So we might do like an 8 to 12 week base building period, which is working, predominantly in the aerobic zones, maybe even 95% in the aerobic zones. But what we'll also do in this phase is add speed. And speed in a base building phase, so speed base, is very, very short bursts of very, very fast running. So things like strides, and built up gradually over long periods of time. Most runners require guidance from a coach when they're adding speed work into the running. And I don't just mean interval sessions, I mean we're working on mechanics, top end speed, neurological recruitment, with very, very short bursts of very, very fast running. So when we come out of this base building phase, we've not just grown aerobic capacity and aerobic endurance, we've actually started to work on our mechanical efficiency. Then what we might do, and this is something that's often missed, we'll drop the volume of that runner's training considerably to allow for a VO2 max phase, where we bring in some VO2 max work. We keep the strides in there as well, because what we do is we always add, we never take things away. We might do a shorter, maybe a 2 to 4 week phase working on VO2 max, and again it's faster paced running, so working on mechanics and running economy. Then we might increase volume again, so we've dropped volume to allow for the VO2 max work, and then as we bring in sort of these middle ground paces like threshold and tempo, maybe an 8 week period that incorporates some of those things, and then again we might work into sort of a race specific phase. Let's say someone was doing a half marathon, we might do quite a lot of work in that sort of tempo area before we taper and race. So a couple of things to take from that periodization is, one, we're always adding, we're never subtracting, we're just always adding little things to that and then maybe dropping them to a maintenance level, but we're never taking them completely out. Right from the start, we go from a volume-driven approach, but that's got top-end speed in there as well. We then decrease the volume to allow capacity to add faster-paced running like VO2 max work in. Then we gradually increase the volume to allow things like threshold and tempo. Probably hold the volume as we're going into some race-specific work before we taper and race. What a runner needs to do, and I don't often use that word, if a runner is lacking top end speed, they need to bring that in really early when the body's still nice and fresh. So after a really easy base building phase with a speed base in there as well, that's when we start to drive things like VO2 max to increase running economy and running efficiency. And then any running that we do after that is just going to work loads better. We're going to get a lot more bang for our buck. So I hope that makes some sort of sense. And if you have any questions, please just pop them in the comments below. And for now, happy running.